Good morning, folks. My name is Mark. I'll be hosting the webinar today. Just to let you know that we're going to grant a little 5-minute grace period to let some other people join in before we get going. All right, I've got 5 past the hour. We still have a few more people expected to come in, but we'll get going in deference to your times, not to keep you any longer than we necessarily have to. Good morning, everybody. You're here today for the FireMon Solutions Expert webinar. My name is Mark Rich. I'll be your instructor today. A little bit about me. I am what we call here at FireMon a Technical Account Manager, or TAM. I work directly with customer resources to quickly address any technical issues that they might run into and help them take care of the feeding of their FireMon ecosystem, ensuring that they get the most value of whatever products of ours they have. So let's go over a little bit about the training agenda for this morning and tomorrow morning. We'll take a quick glance here so you can see what we're getting into. If you have any questions, by all means, please type them in the chat and we will seek to answer them as soon as possible or during a break. And if we can't get that, we will certainly fire you off an email response to the ones that we can't figure out on the spot. I will also be looking to squeeze a quick break in. I know everybody is very busy, so we'll take a 30-minute break or so, let you do all the phone calling, emailing, and stuff that you are requisite to do, and we'll just carry on after that. All right. So first things we want to look at are some of the customer resources that we have, some of the stuff to help you folks get everything that you need from our product and our support team. And that starts off with our user center. This is you're going to be your one-stop shop for all things FireMon. From here, you can access our user guides, the files used to install and update your FireMon products, or eventually additional components that you might want to acquire to help better manage your security infrastructure as well. This is also where you're going to be going to download licensing material for your FireMon systems, submit support tickets, or access our knowledge base articles if you're having some kind of issue. Assuming you don't work alone, you can also add users to this user center for your company or make changes to the users that you have managing your FireMon ecosystem. Let's step through some of these more commonly used features in a bit more detail. From within the user center, you can access the support center, which is that place you go to submit your new support cases or review and update cases that someone in your organization has already opened. You'll also find various user guides and how-to articles in our documentation section, and you'll be able to access some online training materials and video tutorials from here as well. There's also a link in there in our support center where you can submit feedback in the form of suggested enhancements that you'd like to see in our services or products. In the back end, those generate what we call RFEs, or request for enhancement tickets, which our developers and leadership use to plan for in-demand features in future releases of our FireMon software. Also, from the support tile in the user center, you can access our knowledge base articles, or KBs, and that's where you're going to find answers to many commonly seen issues or asked questions. Just a quick demo here so you can see what it looks like. This is what our knowledge base article will look like when you get into it. And if you're trying to find something, for example, how to reindex a database, once you type it in, you'll see that predictive text will start to come in, and you can find the article subject on what it is you are looking for. For example, if I wanted to reindex my database server, I found that article here by typing it in, and you'll find a lovely knowledge base article telling you how to go about that and what you can expect from that result. All right, moving on, let's talk a little bit about the main components that make up our Security Intelligence Platform, or SIP. For those of you who are firewall people at heart, I apologize for using SIP. I'm sure you think it's source IP address I'm talking about, but in our case here, it is the abbreviation for the Security Intelligence Platform, which is the totality of the suite of applications available to you when you purchase FireMon products. All right, there are four main components to the Security Intelligence Platform, or SIP. They are Security Manager, Policy Planner, Policy Optimizer, and Risk Analyzer, and we'll go over a little bit about each role, the role of each of those components for you. Security Manager is the main component of the SIP, and it helps you reduce the risk and complexity in your security infrastructure by orchestrating and managing optimal security policies and network configurations. You might ask how we go about doing that. Well, essentially, we're going to provide you with a single pane, real-time visibility into your existing network and security devices and policies, and help you map the network-wide policy and access as well. Security Manager can also validate and report on policy compliance, and detect and report on changes on your security policies and devices, and provide you with real-time compliance monitoring as well. Policy Planner is our module for intelligently automating change workflows, which is done in a customizable manner that can be integrated with your existing service models and ticketing systems. If you're running ServiceNow, Service Manager, or anything like that, we can generally integrate Policy Planner to talk to those devices, those systems for you. It's going to allow you a range of customizations that can be adapted to help you create, modify, and implement your security changes. And it's going to have options for escalation, notification, and authorization of those changes. Policy Planner can also analyze proposed access changes against risk and compliance controls to ensure that you remain specifically compliant to whatever industry standards or internal compliance policies that you have to meet. It can also provide you with technical recommendations for all the necessary firewall changes that might be required to enable a particular access, and tell you where you might need to make the changes to do that. So with those capabilities, Policy Planner can help you really improve the efficiency and reduce costs associated with change requests, documentation in your firewall rules and compliance reviews as well. Next up is Policy Optimizer, which is how we help you automate rule review, linking your security teams with your policy/compliance owners to validate rules and justify them for continuous assessment and audit purposes. It can also automatically generate requests for a rule review or approval and update all of the access policy documentation or the documentation on those rules once that review gets completed. Policy Optimizer can help you document, risky and overly permissive rules and access policies and streamline the workflow between your operations and compliance teams by documenting that risk acceptance and certification of your firewall rules to help you ensure ongoing compliance with any internal or industry standards. Things like PCI DSS, HIPAA, and SOX, we offer assessments to help you keep on top of those. And finally, we have the Risk Analyzer module, which will help you analyze vulnerabilities and prioritize them for remediation, and also allow you to evaluate the impact of specific attack scenarios on your organization by providing predictive remediation and patch recommendations. Risk Analyzer also integrates with Path Design for policy modification in response to vulnerability information, and it'll recalculate risk based on patching simulations that you can run. So Risk Analyzer essentially can discover weaknesses in your network that are going to be based on what your scanners have discovered from your assets, and evaluate the potential impact of exploits and proactively recommend changes to mitigate them before some attacker takes advantage of them. All right, what can the SIP or Security Intelligence Platform do for you? Well, we essentially have 3 core use cases for using the FireMon suite of products to manage your security devices. The first one we're going to talk about is change monitoring and management, where our policy planner is going to allow you to plan and report on any changes to your firewall policies and rules. A real world example of that, I used to work in a large I used to manage a global team of firewall admins in a very large managed security services provider where change management was heavily enforced. Our team managed some 10,000 firewalls across the globe. Before we had FireMon in place, it was pretty much impossible to track what changes were made on what firewall, by whom, and when. A lot of times changes would get snuck in under the radar in the middle of the night, and sometimes those had catastrophic results when things went sour. And after getting FireMon installed and configured to monitor for changes outside of our defined windows, any push outside of that window resulted in an email, which would trigger a text on my phone telling me all about it. And as you can imagine, the unapproved change pushes ground to a halt shortly after that, along with all of those 3 in the morning outage calls that came with them when things went sour. Our second core use case is about cleanup. Our product helps you clean up unused, inefficient, and overly permissive rules that you might have in your environment. Of course, that can be extremely beneficial. Think about how many times projects might demand that you put in any rules that are going to be deployed to meet some project timeline or some sort of threat of a financial penalty if you don't meet that. And of course, you're always going to be promised by some project manager that we'll tighten those up later. And of course, that never happens, because once you've implemented one of those rules, everybody's terrified that you'll break some critical application connectivity by removing it. So the risk on those is going to be obviously huge, and it's only a matter of time before they'll lead to some sort of breach, and the inevitable "how did you let this happen" fingers pointed squarely at the firewall team when some root cause analysis finds that it was one of those big any rules that opened the door. So FireMon is going to give you the tools to discover exactly what traffic is slipping through those rules, allowing you to create specific new rules to allow that traffic, and eventually remove those any rules with confidence. So if you think about a common scenario on that one, where you have some stuff that's sitting around, a lot of times servers get decommissioned. Nobody tells the firewall teams that a server's been commissioned. And if you think about that a little further, that IP address has some rules in some of your firewalls, allowing some permissions. Your server team is going to eventually recycle that IP address, and surprise, surprise, some new server has inherited whatever access the old one had. Probably not a good thing. FireMon's reporting tools can help you avoid that scenario by identifying rules that are not being used for a given time span and allowing you to disable and eventually delete them in accordance with your organization's change in security policies. And then finally, the third big use case for us is compliance, which can be simplified by using on-demand, scheduled, or fully automated auditing offered by Security Manager. Again, when I was a managed security service provider leader, we used to have a lot of PCI audits on some of our firewalls. we had to export the firewall rules to spreadsheet and manually audit them twice a year to meet the related PCI requirements for semi-annual rule review. The PCI firewalls in my environment had some 14,000 rules, so you can imagine that was a massive time sink. If we'd have had security manager in place when we were doing a lot of these audits, we could have had a constant compliance auditing set up and been in a position to show our auditors a cleanly formatted monthly report showing them exactly what PCI related firewall changes took place, who approved them, and what they were for. Most QSAs that I know would pass your audit on that kind of a thing. All right, let's talk a little bit about what's under the hood for the security intelligence platform and the servers that are required and components that you need to run it. There are 3 components required to run FireMon. They are called the data collectors, application servers, and database servers. So let's get into a little bit of detail on which each of those are going to do for you. The data collectors are the devices that are going to talk directly to your security devices managed by your security intelligence platform. They're going to retrieve the configurations from your devices and process any log files from your security infrastructure as well to stay on top of changes and usage. The application servers, or AS, are going to process all the transactions between the graphical user interface and the data that gets pulled in by those data collectors, which it'll then store in your database. Your application servers are going to be installed on a server class machine typically, and as logically follows, need to have connectivity to your data collectors since the data collectors are collecting all of that information from your security devices. The database servers in the back end are running PostgreSQL database engines, and they're going to be the home to all the data used by security intelligence platform. These servers are going to store your data files such as normalized configurations of your devices, which can then also be used by other servers and applications in your FireMon ecosystem. There are quite a few factors that go into sizing the servers that those components are going to run on. It's highly recommended that you check with either your sales engineer or technical account manager for your customer-specific requirements for what it is you're trying to do. We also have 2 options to deploy the security intelligence platform. Smaller organizations can opt for a single box deployment, as shown on the left side here, where all 3 of those components were going to reside on the same logical server. So you have the application server, database server, and data collector servers, but they're all in one logical box. Once you get these days to around 50 devices that you want to manage with it, you're probably going to need to start thinking about going to a distributed or scaled deployment, as shown on the right here, where you're going to break apart those 3 components onto their own specific servers for them to be able to handle the load that you're going to put on them. Also, if you plan on doing a large amount of reporting and auditing, you might want to consider deploying multiple application servers, which would be set up with some sort of load balancer in the middle of them. So this slide's showing you what ports need to be open between the various components of your security intelligence platform. Your database and application servers are going to talk to each other over PostgreSQL, obviously, as well as port 55555, which is used to access the server control panel, which is a GUI that we provide to help you manage OS level tasks. Application servers talk to data collectors over port 443 or HTTPS, and they're going to talk to other application servers. You have multiples over the ports listed in this gray box right here. Data collectors are going to need a clear communication path to talk to your managed devices over syslog if you're running Cisco or any other type syslog firewall, as well as the ports required for checkpoint, assuming you have checkpoint firewalls, which would be CPMI, LIA, and checkpoint certs ports. In the case of a distributed deployment, it's important that the database and application servers have high-speed connections to each other. If you are using load-balanced application servers, they should be in the same subnet and have multicast enabled. All right, since we all need more acronyms in our lives, I'll give you a new one. FMOS is the FireMon operating system, which is our proprietary operating system built and supported by FireMon, and it's what's going to be installed under all of the SIP components, namely the application server, data collector, and database servers. It is based on CentOS. It is, however, a closed ecosystem, meaning that you cannot install third-party applications over it, and most notably, root access is not available, and you may not elevate privileges either. However, we do provide several utilities and configuration wizards, such as that server control panel we just touched on, to help simplify the installation and maintenance of our product. Any required FMOS security updates or patches are going to be provided by FireMon as part of our regular software releases. And if you are going to be using our FireMon FM series of appliances, those will be shipped with FMOS pre-installed to help you minimize the time it takes to get from delivery to deployment of your ecosystem. All right, that's kind of an overview of the security intelligence platform. Let's do a quick review here of some of the important points to take away about that. The SIP, or Security Intelligence Platform, is your single access point to all licensed FireMon applications. The main components of the SIP are the database, application, and data collector servers. SIP can be deployed in a single box or distributed model, depending on the number of devices that you're going to be managing with it. Again, once you approach the 50 device mark around here, you're likely going to need to go to a distributed model. Data collectors need to be logically located near the devices they're going to be monitoring. If you think about what the data collectors do, they will actually gather the entire raw configuration, routing profile, and everything from your security devices. So there's quite a bit of traffic that's going to be flowing between the two. All right, let's get into more detail on each of the components of the security intelligence platform. And we're going to start off with Security Manager, which is the main component of the SIP. And that's going to be installed by default whenever you purchase anything from FireMon. Depending on your use case, you might have other application modules as well available to you. But let's start off by diving deeper into the main functions that Security Manager handles for you. And that starts with normalization. Big word. Let's start by explaining the term. Normalization within Security Manager means that administrators don't need to have intimate vendor-specific knowledge for every type of security device out there. Security Manager is going to log into each of those firewalls or routers that you want to manage with your SIP, typically over SSH, using the credentials that you're going to configure in our administration panel. And it's then going to gather the raw configuration of those firewalls, which it then validates and begins to normalize. In a nutshell, that means that all of the objects on those firewalls, the rules, the sources, the destinations, the services, et cetera, are going to get created within Security Manager and presented to you through our graphical interface in a standardized view without the confusion of vendor-specific details for each of those management platforms. Also, once those raw firewall configs are ingested by Security Manager, they're going to be stored and made available for use to all modules of the SIP, which means they can be used for compliance purposes, for cleanup, change activity, risk analysis. Pretty much any of the applications can get at it once it's stored in our database. All right, when you get into Security Manager, there's a few features here that are going to help you manage your infrastructure. One of them being called the Omni Search, which is this little gray box up here next to the Security Manager logo that you're going to see when you log in. So that's going to allow you to run searches for various things. It can search based on IP address or services. And of course, predictive search results are going to start displaying as you type, and hitting enter will bring up all of the results. So it can look within IP ranges, rule names, and service objects to find the strings that you're actually looking for, help you get at something you're looking for rather quickly. Also below that, you have the navigation arrow, which is this little blue arrow here in the top left corner. And that arrow-shaped button is going to allow you to navigate through different views of your network. And whenever you switch down to a different view or switch back up to a broader view, the name of the button is going to change to let you know what portion of your infrastructure you're actually viewing at the moment. At the top level, when you log into Security Manager, you will be presented with an overview dashboard. It's going to provide you with an at-a-glance view of the security status of your devices in the currently selected view as selected by that navigation arrow we were just talking about. And it does that through select KPIs or key performance indicators and widgets. You can also perform rule searches from this dashboard, similar to the Omni Search. There's a search engine in there for you to get at stuff quickly. Most of the data that's displayed in these dashboards is going to be taken from a compliance assessment that we run called Best Practices. That assessment is assigned to all of your devices by default whenever you pull them in. And that's basically what's used to build this dashboard. You can unassign your devices from this assignment if you wish, or if you have other assignments that or assessments that you want to run against your devices. Let me actually just open up Security Manager here in our training lab to show you some of this in real time and see how it works. I just have to log in off screen here. All right, so here we are in real time in the Security Manager product in our lab. So OmniSearch refers again to this little gray box up here. If I were trying to figure out which, and you can see here that we are in the enterprise view, which by default means all of the devices that are managed by your FireMon ecosystem. So for example, if I'm looking to find out which firewalls I have that have rules with the string HTTP in it, I can just go ahead and type HTTP in, and you can see here that I'm going to be shown that it exists in several security rules, in several service objects. If I want to find out what all of them look like, I can click on this view all, and I'll be shown all of the rules where the string HTTP exists, as you can see here. And then you'll be shown only rules where somewhere in the string there's the word HTTP. Similarly, I can use IP addresses as noted. For example, if I want to find out where the IP address 10.0 lives in all of my firewalls, I can just type that in. And again, I'm going to be shown a list of where it found matches. We can see here that it found an instance of 10.0 on the management IP of this FTD firewall. In multiple security rules as well as multiple network objects, there is a 10.0 string. And as well inside some of the security rules on the devices that we manage. And again, if I were to click on View All, I would get a list of those rules for me to look at if I wanted to. So for example, if I were to scroll down, I can take ahead and look at this particular rule here on this device, and it will take me directly to that device and show me that rule. And you can see here that there is in fact the 10.0 string in the source IP here for this rule. And you might also notice here that the navigation arrow has changed from enterprise down to this Cisco ASA because I'm looking specifically at this device. And that leads us rather conveniently to our next point, which is to look at that navigation widget. So by clicking this arrow, I can navigate to more specific customized views of my devices, which are built essentially by grouping the devices together. And of course, as you just saw, the name of this button is going to change to reflect whatever level it is I've chosen to look at. For example, if I only wanted to see the devices that live in North America, I can select them and see that this Cisco is the only one that's been tagged as living there in North America. I can choose to look at only the devices that are in my DMZ, and I'll be shown that there are 3 that live there as well. So there's pretty much a lot of ways you can slice and dice this. You create device groups. We'll be looking at that tomorrow in much more detail. And that's how you create this particular hierarchy of this menu. We'll switch back to enterprise to look at all our devices for the moment. All right, still here in our lab instance, since we're looking at this overview dashboard, which is what we're going to show you next, this is where we have those key performance indicators at the top here. Whenever you see a little blue eye in your FireMon system, if you hover over it with your mouse, it's going to give you an explanation of what it is you're about to be shown or what it is you're looking at here. Device inventory obviously is the number of devices that live in this particular group that I've selected to look at here. The devices revised in the last 30 days, or sorry, the 7 days list is going to show you the number of devices that have seen a revision, as well as what that number represents as a percentage of the devices in the group that you're looking at. A revision, by the way, is a FireMon concept that describes the configuration changes on a device that were collected by FireMon and pulled in. Over here, we have the unused rules widget, which is going to show you how many rules have not been used in the last 3 months on the devices that live in the group that you're currently looking at. And again, excuse me, what percentage of the total devices that you own that represents. You can see that there are clickable links here in the KPI boxes that you can use to drill down for more detail as well. For example, if I wanted to see which rules haven't been used in the last 90 days, I can just click on this link right here, and I will get a view of all of those unused rules, along with the details of each rule, specifically what firewall does that rule live on, what's the source, the destination, the service, the action, whether it's failing any of those compliance controls as well. There's the revision that was used. They're all going to be numbered whenever a configuration gets collected by FireMon from one of your devices. That's the revision number that collected this latest configuration, when it was collected, and which user actually triggered that collection is going to be listed there as well. You'll also notice that I can get further details here from the links up top once I've clicked down. And again, if you see a little blue eye, you hover over it and you will be shown what it is that this is trying to tell you. For example, the cleanup needed widget is showing you rules that are redundant, shadowed, or unused in the last 90 days or even expired. So if I just click that, you can see all of the rules that say they need to be cleaned up as soon as you see it. What you're seeing in this box here is what's called a SICL query, or Security Intelligence Query Language. That is our proprietary query language, which is quite powerful, allowing administrators to build and save custom queries to suit their needs rather than be limited by the default filters through which we allow you to view your security ecosystem. You can completely customize these to get a view that suits your purposes. And the last KPI up here is the average security concern index, or SCI. This is a number, it's the average of the security concern index assigned to all the devices in the group you're currently viewing. SCI is a number that's calculated by comparing the number of past compliance controls to the number of failed compliance controls, and it takes that number and then compares it to the control severity total that lives in your network to give you a percentage of the security concern index for this particular device group. So below the KPIs, you can also find other useful widgets here, such as this top 10 list of the devices that have been revised recently. Again, a revision being the FireMon process by which a device reports its configuration to your data collectors, which can be triggered either by a change or a configurable time-based polling as well. There is a widget here for your average security concern index trend, which rules are contributing to control failures and what severity control failures they are contributing to. And of course, these are all clickable if you wanted to drill down and take a look at those. You have rule usage by cumulative severity, which is not populated currently because there isn't a lot of action going on in the training lab. You also have a widget here for most severe control failures, which is going to show you devices with a combination of the most rules with the highest amount of associated severity. Down at the bottom here, we have a widget called devices ranked by complexity in descending order, and the most active devices also ranked by hit count. Device complexity, by the way, is another one of those math metrics that we pull out for you. And that's found by multiplying the number of sources, destinations, services, users, applications, and so on in these devices. And once that gets multiplied, the more complex it is, the higher the number goes. And that's basically how that number is derived. As noted in the dashboard here, there's also a widget to perform those rule searches similar to the Omni search. So if you're living in your dashboard and you, for some reason, perhaps an exploit that's going on over a particular port and you want to find out where that particular port lives in your devices, you can just type in service HTTP, for example. And of course, if you click the include any box, and again, there's a little blue eye you can hover over, you just click that. That basically means that you will also see rules that have HTTP and the word any in, or service of any in the either the source or, sorry, the service field, which will obviously allow HTTP to go through as well. So that can be a pretty handy tool to find instances of a particular protocol that might be the source of an exploit affecting your network currently. All right, next to the overview dashboard, you have the policy tab, and that is basically going to show you a similar dashboard, only now you're getting more specific to the security policies installed on the selected group of devices that you're looking at. And again, that can be narrowed down to specific groups to get information on those groups specifically that you might want to look at. Actually, there's some slides here on that, so I'll show you the policy tab as well, but I'll just show it to you in real time as well. So the policy tab is also going to allow you to view additional metrics that are going to be in policies, such as security and NAT rules, routes, and so forth. So if you just click on the policy tab, you can see that you can change your view to look at the security rules themselves. You might want to look at your service objects to understand what's going on in there, or maybe your NAT rules is what you're interested in. So you've got a lot of different ways to look at your security policies so you can get through there. So what you're looking at here is the ability to view configuration changes between two revisions on any particular device you wish. So here you are looking at a Palo Alto firewall in the tab here. You can see that we have a revision number here that gets collected, basically gets assigned when the configuration gets collected by your data collector. And then the old ones, you can look back by toggling this view changes to on. Then you can look back on old revisions to understand what's changed from this date, from this date to this date, from the older one to the more recent one. So that can be a pretty handy troubleshooting tool. If somebody tells you that an application has stopped working, you can go to that device, take a look at its raw configuration files, and actually go back and do a comparison to see what's changed. And you can see here that anything that gets highlighted in green is something that got added between those two revisions. Something highlighted in red is something that was removed, and something that is highlighted in blue is going to be something that was changed between this revision and this one. Right, still on that policy tab, if I'm looking specifically at security rules, this is where we can get to see all of the security rules that live in this particular device group that we're looking at in that vendor agnostic format, where all of the related tags and security manager details are going to be displayed in this standardized view regardless of the firewall vendor. So scrolling down to the bottom here, you can see that I'll be shown 20 at a time by default. If I have a particularly large environment, I can expand that and look at 100 rules at a time. It's just going to take a few seconds for it to go ahead and pull all of the rules off these devices to show them to us. There they are. And if you scroll down here, you'll notice that everything is in this standardized vendor agnostic view. The first while we're just looking at rules from this Cisco ASA, but as we scroll downwards, we'll see that we're looking at different firewalls and different vendor types. There's some FMCs, but we're still in the Cisco realm. But again, you have the rule number, which policy it is, what the device name is. There's going to be a source, a destination, a service, the action. There'll be hit counts for firewalls that are getting usage. Whether it was used or not will show up here. And there'll be some property sections that'll trigger. If it's failing any compliance controls that you have set up, they will show up here as well. And you'll get information on the latest revision that was collected or latest configuration collection from that device, when it took place and who did it. So you can go down here and see that even though we get out of the Cisco realm into different vendors, that vendor view will be standardized. Here we are in Fortinet, so you're still getting the same thing, even though it's not Cisco. It's still the source, the destination, the service, and all of the other details that are going to be normalized and given to you in this vendor agnostic view, so you can understand the same data about all of your firewalls, regardless of who built them, and save you the trouble of having to log into 5 different management stations to get information from your firewalls. So this is also where you're going to be able to set up filters to view your firewall's rules in a particular way that you want to see them. For example, let me demonstrate here. We're looking at all of the rules here in our enterprise group. If I wanted to add a filter to only show me rules, for example, that are failing controls that are either critical or high, I can just select that filter and hit apply. And now you'll see that the rules that I'm going to be shown are going to be repackaged for me. And only the ones that meet the criteria of this filter are the ones that I'm going to see. And you can see here that now I'm only looking at rules that have a failed control of either critical or high nature. And that lets me understand where I'm at with that particular compliance for my firewalls. You can also compound those searches. So if I wanted to add another filter and look for something here that is going to be, let's see, last changed, then I want to give it a date to tell me that I want to see only firewall rules that have failed a critical or a high compliance control. For example, in the last year, I'm not interested in looking at anything older than that. I can just let it see only 365 days. And you can see that now there's only 15 rules as opposed to the previous, which was, one second here, it's going to take a few seconds to get that back for me. there was 133 results that had failed or critical ones. And if I go back to look at the actual filter with in the last year, there's only 15 that failed in the last year. So I have a lot of flexibility on how it is I want to view my firewall rules, and I can use these filters to help me, define what it is I actually want to look at. Also, if I want to save this filter because it's one that I would like to use, I can do so. Just go ahead and click Save As here, and then I would give this filter a name for future purposes. So I put the failed high in the last year. I could put a description in here if I'm intending to share this with other users, which I can, and I'll show you that in a second. Give it a nice description so that people will understand what this filter is going to show them. If I want to share it, I just toggle this shared with, and I get to decide which users in my FireMon ecosystem are going to be able to use this particular filter, as well as myself. And if I have show in favorites, then it's going to show up in this little funnel here for quick access to the filtering. So for example, the one I just saved, there's my failed high last year. And if I click that, I'm actually filtering the rules that are in the enterprise group based on those two filters. So also of note here, these are using the default filter bricks as described that are going to be coming with your FireMon ecosystem to help you, change the way you're looking at stuff. If you want to get more advanced and use some very complex filters to do that, you can use that security intelligence query language or SQL. A good way to learn that is to start off by using some of these out-of-the-box filters to change the way you're looking at your devices and the rules within them. And then once you've got it pretty close to what you're actually looking for to have as a view, you can click the Advanced button up here, and you'll actually be shown the SQL query that is used to build that filter brick view that is going to come out of the default box. So you can, get as close as you can using the default filters, and then you could come in here, pull out a SQL manual that we have available to you on our user center, and then figure out how you want to change this to look at something more specific. And then you could save that as one of those specific filters for yourself, or share it with your users if you wish. All right, there are also rule documentation fields in the Security Manager application for you. Those can be manually populated, or you can also pull those fields in from rule comments that exist on your devices using regex patterns to pull in that information. It's also possible to bulk edit the documentation fields of multiple rules simultaneously, which you could typically select via some sort of filter brick or a SQL query like we were just showing you. Of note here, you cannot push those rule documentation fields to your firewalls. You can pull them in from the comments sections using those regex patterns, but you can't push them back out to the firewalls. The rule documentation fields exist only in your FireMon ecosystem and can't actually be pushed back out to your devices. Also, if you are using Policy Planner or Policy Optimizer, those applications can actually fill in those documentation fields whenever a change ticket or review ticket gets completed, help you stay on top of that rule documentation for your compliance needs. So let's take a look at how some of that works in Security Manager. Actually, just one second, I'll pull up another window. So looking here at the rules that exist on this Palo Alto firewall, which you can see I'm looking at exclusively by the navigation arrow as described. If I want to look at the rule documentation fields for rule number 1, for example, which are designed to drop telnet from this source to this destination, I could just look at that telnet drop rule, go down, scroll to the bottom, and I will be shown the rule documentation fields that are specific to this particular rule. I have a customer named Wile E Inc. here. I could go ahead and edit that, for example. If Wile E Inc. is getting bought out by Acme, I can go ahead and edit that. And once I click save, you'll see that it actually changed the customer name. And that's going to allow me to change that field just ad hoc like that. If I wanted to bulk update several rules, for example, I would go back to the Security Manager overview. Let's go to all my devices here so you can see how I would go about this. And if I were looking to look at that example where Wile E Inc. just got bought out by Acme, I can add a filter here, and I go down to the documentation section for filters that are down here, and I can actually search on what rules belong to this particular customer. And if I'm looking for while, I can hit apply, and I will you'll see only rules that have the string while E in it, and I can see that I have 27 rules that belong to that particular customer. And again, if, for example, they just got bought out by Acme, I could come in here and update all these rules simultaneously by doing a action update rule doc, and then I'll be popped up with this update rule documentation field, and I'm going to find the customer field and decide that I want to replace all of the instances of this while E with Acme since they bought them. And once I hit next down here, I will be told what I'm about to do. I'm going to update my customer field across 27 selected rules, and I'm going to replace the existing with the value Acme. Once I click submit, I'll be shown a lovely little pop-up toast here that tells me that it might take 15 minutes, but given the size of the training environment, I'll also be shown that it actually did successfully update them. And if we go back to that first one we looked at, that was Acme, I can actually show you that it did indeed, or the second one, since I changed that one manually first. Oh, sorry. Now I have to change this because I just changed it. And I should get the same 27 rules that I just got, or 28 since I had one extra up here. There you go. So that is how you would bulk update those fields in order to stay on top of that kind of thing. Just to show you how you would go about pulling those in from your firewalls through the comments fields using the regex, I'll just jump over to the administration panel here. And this is where you're going to see here in the rule documentation settings what the regex pattern is that's going to be used to pull a particular field documentation out of your firewall comments fields. For example, if I wanted to populate the owner field of a particular rule documentation section, you can see here that this regex pattern is going to kick in, and anything after own : is going to be deemed to be the owner of that particular rule and used to populate that owner field. Those regex patterns can be changed and customized, but generally speaking, they will work in default mode. All right, we also have the device map in Security Manager, which is a customizable graphic display of your network device topology. It is going to be derived from your most current normalized configurations of each of your devices in Security Manager, as well as from any routing or interface information that's been manually entered into your Security Manager ecosystem. In order to appear on the map, each device in a device group must have a unique IP address. Seems rather standard, but it bears notification just to make sure that you don't have conflicting IP addresses to confuse things. You can, of course, customize the map as required once you get into that map display. Let me show you what that looks like. Right, here we are in the map display. You would get there from your, and we're looking at the all devices group, which is similar to enterprise. And I'm looking at the topology and map section here. You have a legend of what each of these little icons is telling you about your devices. These are firewalls, these are network segments. Once you get in here, you can basically zoom in or out to view a particular piece of your topology if you wish. If you click on a particular device, you'll get some details on what that device is and some of its configurations, such as the Ethernet interfaces here on this checkpoint firewall. You can move your device around. You can also move your devices into different sections of your map and set them up any way you want. If I go back to that checkpoint firewall, you can see that there's other ones, and there's that lab FortiGate. I can pretty much look at the details for each one of these firewalls that I'm managing inside my network map. We also have an access path analysis feature in Security Manager, and that's going to allow you to track the flow of packets through your network configurations. It's going to let you view the routes, interfaces, firewall, and NAT rules that a packet encounters while it's trying to get through your network. That can be a pretty powerful analysis tool that can help you find where rules might be blocking access along a given path, or identify where route configurations might be preventing specific path access, and analyze basically how traffic is able to travel from inside your network to the outside rule. and it's going to be based on a source IP, a destination IP, and a service. If I'm looking to run an access path analysis, I'll stay right here in Security Manager and go to the Topology and Access Path Analysis tab. At this point, I need to provide with the source IP and a destination IP for FireMon to be able to figure out how this is going to flow through your network or your existing devices that it knows about. And then I will give it a destination IP here of 1.1.1.4, and we'll go with a destination port of HTTPS or 443. And once I click run, I'll be shown which devices are most likely to be in the path of this particular packet. And once I click on each of those to get the details on how it's going to flow through them and click run, I will actually be shown the path, and I can get details on how this flows through just by clicking on these to understand that it's going to enter this network segment. And now it's going to hit this lab FortiGate here, and it's going to come in through this particular interface, get hit by this NAT policy, get routed by this particular route, match this rule in this policy, and then exit through this interface and go on to this segment, and then on down to this next firewall that's going to hit, which is going to be this Palo Alto, which interface it comes into, which NAT it gets natted by, which policy it does it, and which rule in that policy hits it, and so on down the line. So you can see how that's a pretty powerful feature to be able to figure out in your network when somebody tells you they need access from IP A to destination B over service C. This will help you figure out which firewalls need to be changed in order to make that happen for your customers. All right, let's talk a bit about reports that are available to you in Security Manager. Reports are going to be checks that you run on specific aspects of your system. By definition, a report is the formatted output of a configuration analysis that you're going to perform. Security Manager provides several ad hoc reports available to you out of the box that can be run on your devices. This list describes only some of what's available. There's quite a few more than that, and we'll look at them in a second. In the Security Manager application, you can run ad hoc or on-demand reports within Security Manager. You can also choose the file format that you want that output to appear in between HTML and PDF typically. You can also create custom reports or scheduled reports to include additional recipients or people that might be outside of your FireMon ecosystem, but you would do that through the scheduled reports feature in our administration application as opposed to in Security Manager. Let me show you the difference between the two so you can understand what I mean by that. So here in Security Manager, if you switch over to the Reports tab here and look at the Reports library, this is where you're going to get the entire list of reports that are available to you out of the box, along with a description of what they're going to show you once you run it against one or more of your devices. Once a report has been run, it will be stored by default in your My Reports tab here for 14 days by default. You can change how long you store those reports. Just do keep in mind that the longer you keep them, the more you're sitting there using up disk space. Depending on how big the report is and how many devices you've run it on, it can get pretty huge pretty quick. And if you have a lot of users running reports and storing them, that's probably something you want to stay on top of to make sure that you don't overrun your disks and start running out of space, which is never a good thing on a Linux-based servers. So just to show you what this looks like, for example, we could run a removable rules report, and that's going to show us how many rules can safely be removed because they're either shadowed or redundant. We'll select which device we want to run this on. Let's pick on this Cisco ASA, which is first in the list. Of course, I want to toggle this to see which rules are actually causing shadowing or redundancy, and I want the details on the objects within that report. And again, I can select here whether I get the output here in just straight up HTML, or if I want it in PDF. Typically, if you're running a report to provide to some sort of auditor, they will want to see it in PDF format because it proves that you haven't modified the output. So that's basically what that's designed to do for you. Once you click run the report, FireMon's going to go out there and query that particular device that you pointed it at, and it's going to show you here that it has found, in fact, 5 rules which have been identified as removable by this report, and it'll go on to tell you why. So you can actually, inside this inside access in policy, it's found 1 rule that can be identified as removable, and why? Because rule number 3 is shadowed by rule number 2. What I mean by shadowed, if you look here, you have the same source, the same destination, and the same service. However, the action is opposite. One is going to drop it, the other one is going to accept it. Unfortunately, it's rule number 2 that's going to drop it. So rule number 3 that would have accepted this packet will never get hit. You might as well remove number 3 and save yourself some processing power on this Cisco. And the same goes down here for the outside access out policy. In that one, there's 4 rules that have been identified as removable, along with why. For example, here, rule number 2 is shadowed by rule number 1, so it'll never get hit. Rule number 5 is made redundant by rule number 3. They're essentially doing the same thing. You have more specific source and destination here in rule number 5, but you have an any and both of those fields in rule number 3. So rule number 3 will pick up any of these packets here, and rule number 5 will become pretty useless. So that's basically how you can figure out how some of your rules might be removable by running that report across your ecosystem and finding out what it is you can remove. So those are the ad hoc or one-off reports that you're going to run in your Security Manager application, whereas you can also set up scheduled reports to run automatically or to be sent to users that live outside of your FireMon ecosystem, as well as those inside it. Those get set up from the administration panel. Let me show you how you get there. Here we are in Security Manager application. You just flip over to administration, which is going to move us over to where we go ahead and administer our ecosystem. And the first thing we're going to do is look here in the system tab and look at the reports, which are going to allow me to now set up a report by hitting create here. And I want to decide what kind of security report that I want to set up as scheduled. Let's do a security rules report, which is going to give me the details on some security rules. Useful tidbit here, whatever name you give this report, if you're emailing it outside of your FireMon ecosystem or even within your FireMon ecosystem, the name that you give this report will become the subject line of the email that has this report attached. So if you're running this report on 10 different firewalls, I would suggest setting it up with a specific name for that report given the firewall, so that when somebody gets 10 different reports, they don't all say the same thing. They're more specific to what the actual report content is. So if I wanted to do a security rules report, and let's say I'm going to run it on all my devices, I can click the all devices group. I could decide to do it from a custom query if I have a particular hankering to learn how to use SQL and create some crazy, very complex query, or I could use one of the saved filters that I've created if I wish as well, and I can just go in there and select it. For example, let's use that failed high last year that we just created a few seconds ago, and I'll actually be shown the actual SQL content or context here that's going to run it. Down here in the options section, when you're scheduling a report, you get to select how much detail is going to be provided in that report. So obviously I want the details on the objects that are within those rules, what the members are of those rules. I'm going to put the comments fields in there as well because I want to see them, and the rule identifier. We'll skip rule documentation just for the purpose of the demonstration, but you could add that in as well if you wish. And down here in scheduling properties, this is where you can decide how often this report's going to run. So if you wanted to run, you can select now, which is just going to do one shot of it. I'm not clear on what the difference between once and now is, but they both do it once. You can set it up to run through a particular cron tab. There is a cron access here. It's going to be running in the background, so you can set that up to run on a scheduled basis there. Or you can set it up to run on a particular interval if you wish. I'll just choose monthly for the sake of argument here. And you'll notice that the fields, some of them have red asterisks next to them. That's telling you that this field needs to be populated in order for this report to be saved and run. So I will provide a description here, pretty short form, just for the purposes of moving us through this. But in general, you want to be as descriptive as possible with your descriptions to make sure that anybody who's getting this understands exactly what it is they're about to look at. I could select which day of the month I want this to be run on. Since I've selected monthly, let's just choose last day of the month to make it nice and easy. I can decide when this report starts to run, and I can choose a day and a time as well. By default, you're going to be taken to midnight or 12 a.m. every whenever this report runs. Do be aware that that's also the default time the backups will start running on most of your devices or on your security infrastructure for FireMon. So you might want to get into the habit of scheduling outside of 12 a.m. to stop any kind of conflict between those two running if you're running rather large reports. And again, the end time here is going to allow you to decide when this report stops running. So if I've decided this is a monthly report and it's only going to run on the last day of the month, maybe I want it to run for 6 months or so, and then it'll stop running after March 31st. Down here in the notification settings is where I get to decide who gets to see this report without me having to worry about it. And then remember, this is going to be a scheduled report that runs every last day of the month, and it's going to email out without any interaction from me. Very useful if you have some reports that you need to provide to a particular group, such as a compliance, or your boss wants to see some reports. This is where you would set that up to happen automatically. You can send it to users that live inside of your FireMon ecosystem, such as your coworkers or team members or so on, or perhaps there's somebody, a big boss type guy, C-level executive, who needs to see the report on a monthly basis, but doesn't have a user ID in your FireMon ecosystem. Then you would just provide the email address of that particular person right here in the additional email address section, which will result in them also getting a copy of this. You can also zip the file if you want to send slightly smaller emails. It'll compress it down for you. And you can also sign and encrypt the email if you have extreme security requirements to do so. Just be aware that you will need to provide some sort of certificate to your application server to be able to encrypt them. And once you've got it all set up the way to run the way you expect, you just go ahead and click save, and you'll see that your report has now been saved. And that this report is now ready to go, and it's going to fire September 30th at 2 a.m. All right, that pretty much covers us for the Security Manager section. A few important points that you want to remember about Security Manager. Of course, you're going to see overview dashboards, which are going to include key production indicators and widgets to help you track the performance and security status of all your devices that you're managing with your FireMon ecosystem. The policy tab next to that is going to contain that normalized and raw configuration for each device that you're monitoring with your Security Manager product. The security rules tab is going to display information about pretty much most brands of firewalls in a standardized vendor agnostic view, saving you the trouble of having to log into multiple firewall management stations or firewalls to pull the same data. We used to have to do that a lot, log into a lot of firewalls, export everything in CSV, pull it all together in some big fat spreadsheet, and then start manipulating it there. Well, once you've got Security Manager installed, you can say goodbye to those lovely days of Excel fun. So all of this information can be filtered as well using our advanced filtering capabilities, which would be either through SQL or through the default filters that we provide you out of the box. All right, let's take a quick time check. All right, I know it is currently 5 after 11 my time. I'm not sure how many of you are in Eastern time, but I know most of you are pretty busy people. Let's take a 20-minute break, and we will resume at 25 after the hour. If you have any questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat room. And if I can't answer them now, I will make sure that I can answer them through an email to you after the webinar. So let's take a quick break, and we will resume in 20 minutes. All right, folks, I got 11:25 or 25 past the hour, wherever you are. So let's get going back into it, and let's take a look at how Security Manager helps you monitor changes in your security infrastructure. All right, first off, let's define what a change is versus a revision in the FireMon world. A change refers specifically to when something in the firewall policy is modified on one of your security devices, whereas a revision is going to be the table that contains that raw information on anything that changes on your firewalls. That can include the device changes. However, revisions can also contain raw file changes that might not show up in your security manager infrastructure. For example, if you were to change the time on one of your devices to reflect daylight savings shifts, that would show up in a revision. It would not show up in a device change. So just to show you what that looks like, if we take a look here on the change dashboard, here's where we're going to get those KPIs again, only now they are more specific to how many revisions and configuration changes have taken place in the last 7 days, along with some other metrics of interest here on the change dashboard. You can see that over the last 7 days, 9 revisions have taken place in the lab. The most recently one revised was the Cisco ASA here. Devices with rule changes over the last 7 days, there were none. Also, there were no change window violations, which is one of those compliance controls that you can set up to trigger any violations of people pushing policy to your firewalls outside of defined change windows. As you go down, you will see some revisions impacting the security concern index, the last 10 revisions, as well as the devices that have recently been revised, the top 10 list here, and the last 20 changes that took place in your infrastructure will be listed here in this particular widget. And then you can get down here to the changes by user report, which will only apply to the users making those actual changes on your device. All right, switching over to the revisions tab here from the changes. If you wanted to see all of the changes or all of the revisions, you could switch specifically to each of those tabs to find where all of that's going on in your infrastructure. And again, it's going to be based on whatever the view is that you've selected in your navigation arrow. If you want to look at revisions, which are going to be those raw configuration changes in your devices, for example, one of the powerful features that we were talking about a little bit earlier is the ability to compare those raw configuration changes between revisions. So let's add a little filter here. A lot of times we're going to be able to narrow what we want to look at here by applying filters. So we'll choose a change count of greater than 10 because we want devices that have had some recent revisions pulled in. And let's go ahead and apply that. And now we're only going to see devices that have had some changes on them recently, as opposed to all of the single revisions that are in there. So if I take a look at this first revision here, 7365, that number is assigned automatically by FireMon when you pull in that raw device configuration. So if I take a look at that particular revision where there's been some changes, I can turn on that view changes to allow me to look at older revisions. And this one came in April. And if I want to compare that to older ones, I can just click that view changes on button here, and now I can compare it to an older revision. Here I'm comparing it against something that came in December. If I want to see the differences here, you can see that there have been things modified as they are highlighted in blue. Which rules got modified between these two revisions is what I'm being shown here. I can also shift over to different tabs to see the changes in those specific areas. For example, changes to service objects will show up here in this tab, and I can see here that I have deleted the ones that are highlighted in red, and that the ones that were in green have been added to these particular service objects on this firewall between this revision and this one. Same for the application objects tab. I can see what changes have taken place there. You can see all these modifications as they're highlighted in blue. If there were any changes done to the NAT rules, they will show up here in that tab as well. And you can see that there was a change made here. If there was any routing changes that took place, they will show up here in the route files. And you can see that these were deleted, these were added. And if I can even go down and look at the actual raw files, if I want to look at what it is that's actually going on here, I can look at the running config, although it's probably going to tell me that I can't look at it because it's too big, but I could barely look at the route changes, which should populate. Hang on one second. So if you look at that, you can see the changes between the two in the system configuration here. And if I wanted to, I could compare them side by side as well. So I could see what's changed between this revision and this revision and get an actual view of what has been modified here. So this is what we just did here, actually in real time in the lab. All right, under the Compliance/Change Windows tab of your administration panel, you're able to view what change windows have been assigned to your devices or device groups. So this is where you get to set up those system-wide change windows that are going to trigger those compliance controls to tell you that somebody has pushed a change to your device that isn't inside a change window that you've configured. So you can go here in the Compliance Change Windows section and click Create, and then you can actually create that change window as required, which is going to be used to track that compliance, and any violations thereof will appear in the related KPI of your Security Manager tab. So it's important to note here when you're looking at time on your FireMon ecosystem, everything in the background on your FireMon servers is going to be in UTC time in raw format in your database server, whereas when you're looking at this stuff in your GUI, you're going to be shown your local time, since your browser time will override what's in the back end. So if you're running a particular report and looking in your GUI and you're actually looking at the raw stuff in the back end at the command line, what you're going to see in the back end is going to be running currently, I think, 5 hours ahead. If I'm in Eastern time zone, it's 5 hours ahead because it's UTC time in London. And you just something to be aware of if you're going to be doing stuff that is time sensitive. All right, let's look a little bit about change reports. There are reports available that are specific to changes that are packaged for you. The change report is going to give you a report on changes that have been made to a policy during a chosen time period. There's also the changes by user report, which will provide you with a record of any configuration changes made by a specific user during a defined time period, and that works on Palo Alto's and Checkpoint CMAs as well. The comparison report is going to let you compare changes to the raw configuration files for a selected device, so you can understand what's changed between the two. And then there's the file comparison report, which will display the differences between two of a device's current raw configuration files. For example, if it was a Cisco, you could compare between the Cisco startup config and running config, for example, to understand if anything's changed. Kind of handy if you have cluster firewalls. A lot of times what I've seen is you have a cluster, one's active, one's in the background in standby mode. A lot of times we used to have trouble with people would push to the active member and forget to update the standby one, and then failover happens, and there's a pile of rules that don't exist on the secondary, and all of a sudden you have an outage. So this file comparison report would allow you to make sure that you are up to date when you have clusters like that, and you can actually figure out, if there's any difference between the two. All right, a quick review on the important points for change monitoring before we move on. The revisions page will list any type of change on your devices versus the changes page is only going to show you changes specific to the policies on your firewall. You can compare firewall revisions side by side, as we just demonstrated a few slides ago, which is, of course, going to be an extremely useful troubleshooting tool when you have some sort of connectivity issue and somebody tells an application to stop working. You can understand what's changed between the current and previous configurations that have been collected by your FireMon ecosystem. All right, in this next section, we're going to look at how you would use FireMon's tools to reduce the complexity of your security ecosystem by identifying devices that need some housekeeping, as well as how we use our tools for cleaning up your policies and rules, and even remediating overly permissive rules that might exist in your environment, which is a really great feature to have. I wish I'd have had it back when, in my old days, managing that big managed security services provider firewall team. All right, this graphic describes the ongoing process of minimizing complexity you start off by identifying devices that need attention, and then you will step down and look at its firewall policy to make that as clean as possible. Then you will go down and look at the rules within that policy and can clean those up as much as possible. And finally, you're going to look at overly permissive rules and how you can tighten up those as well. And then you'll skip up to the next device down and wash, rinse, repeat until you've got all of your devices cleaned up, or at least as clean as they can possibly be. So while there aren't really strict definitions for policy versus rule, policy is interpreted to be the abstract idea of what is allowed or not allowed by a particular organization. So I guess you could call it capital P policy, as opposed to lowercase p in the policies in your firewalls. So the rules are going to be the effective translation of that policy enforced by your security devices. For example, your corporate policy might say that you cannot allow terminal access to the DMZ from the internet. You would have a rule to enforce that would look something like source internet destination DMZ services TCP 21.22.3.389, and the action would be dropped to prevent that access coming in from the internet. So from a firewall perspective, a collection of rules grouped together form your policy, and that policy is going to be applied to your security devices for your given organization. And in our quest to reduce the complexity thereof, we're going to work down from device level to policy level, then into rules, and finally looking within the rules themselves to make things as tight as possible. So the first step in cleaning up your stuff is identifying which devices you want to clean up. So we have a couple of ways to look at that. Let me show you again that device complexity widget that we were looking at earlier. Oops, I guess 20 minutes is too long. And we'll go back in there. So again, here you are in your Security Manager dashboard. This is a mathematical calculation of complexity by device, which again is the multiplication of all the sources, destinations, and so on in all of the rules that exist, which assign it a mathematical number rating its complexity. And this widget is going to show you the most complex and on downwards that exist in your environment. Little note here about choosing your cleanup targets. So these reports are going to be mathematically based. Only a human really understands what's potentially the most dangerous and critical firewall in your ecosystem. For example, our report here based on math says that our Palo Alto firewall is the most complex we have. However, it might be hidden deep inside our network with almost zero access to it, whereas I might have some critical web servers that are protected by firewalls in my DMZ, or perhaps PCI compliance requirements, PCI zone there. So I'd probably want to target those firewalls first to make sure those get cleaned up, as opposed to relying purely on the mathematical calculation that FireMon's doing. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're trying to keep your devices nice and clean. So going back to that dashboard, we'll use the mathematical calculation here telling us that this Palo Alto is our most complex device, and we'll start by wanting to clean up that one. So the first thing we would want to do is take a look at that and there, and the next thing we would want to look at is run the firewall complexity report. And what that's going to show us is how each rule can be broken out into more specific logical rules. A lot of time, rule get deployed with very broad ranges in the sources and destinations and services, which create a leaner rule base, which is less taxing on your device. However, it is also less secure because you have a more complex rule with multiple sources, multiple destinations, multiple potential services, which are going to allow access at a higher level and less granular. So less system resource requirement, but inferior security. So this is something you want to start looking at when you're looking at that. If you have a lot of those broad rules that are allowing a lot of stuff, running that firewall complexity report is going to allow you to understand which rules might be able to be broken out into smaller, more specific logical rules to allow you to have more granular security. So we'll switch over to the reports library. And if you look here at the firewall complexity report, this is what's going to give you a list of security rules on a single device, including the complexity of each rule. And again, you can see here that it's based on the number of sources, destinations, services, and so on. So our Palo Alto was the one that was identified as the most complex according to the math. So we'll go ahead and pick on that. and I want the object details to understand what it is that's going to be running in there. So if I go ahead and run that report, I will be shown a list of rules on this Palo Alto, which have been determined to be complex. And you can see here that rule number 13, it has 8 sources, 2 destinations, and 3 different services, all grouped into one rule. Logically speaking, we could break that into 48 logical rules. If you do the math, 8 times 2 times 3 is going to give you 48, which means you could actually break this one rule and break it out into 48 more specific rules, allowing access to each one of these sources, to each one of these destinations, over each one of these services. Again, that's going to be more processing power demanded from this firewall. However, it's more precise and more granular security. Really a matter of what it is you're looking for to decide whether or not you'd like to keep them grouped in here or break them out into more specific security rules. So once we've gotten past that, one of the next things we might want to look at here is to run the removable rules report, and that's going to show us any rules that can be safely removed because they're shadowed or redundant, as we demonstrated earlier. This time we'll pick on that Palo Alto since it's the device that our math tells us is the most complex. And obviously I want to look at the details of which rules are going to cause that shadowing and redundancy and what those object details are within those rules. And once I run that report, you can see here that on the Palo Alto, there have been 5 rules identified as removable. And I can start cleaning that policy up here by removing rule number 17 because it's made redundant by rule number 16, and so on down the list as I'm looking at the various rules that have been identified as removable by this report. So earlier we just looked at the complex firewalls report to understand, or firewall complexity report to understand what rules can be broken out into more specific rules. If you have the reverse case of that, where you have a device, perhaps an old legacy firewall that's floating around and you're starting to run out of CPU and memory, but don't have the budget cycles this year to replace it or get rid of it, you might want to use this rule consolidation report, which is the reverse of the firewall complexity report, which tells you which rules can be consolidated without changing the behavior of the policy. So that's basically the reverse of that firewall complexity report, where you can now take all those smaller logical rules and group them into one big one, which is of course going to be less secure from a security policy perspective, but less demanding on the infrastructure or the actual system resources that you've got there. So we'll go back to the reports list here, and I will pick out that rule consolidation report. And again, we'll run that one on that Palo Alto, which is the same one we've got a while ago. And I'll get those object details here and run the report in HTML. And you can see here that there has 3 rules on this firewall that have been identified as candidates for consolidation, and why you could consolidate them. For example, here, you have rule number 9 here that has a source of any, destination of any, and a service of syslog or TFTP with an action of accept. And you can see that rule number 18 also has a source of any, destination of any, but only has TFTP in the application with an action of accept. So realistically, you could group these into a single rule, get rid of rule number 18, and save a little bit of processing power in CPU and RAM on your Palo Alto firewall, maybe extend its life a little bit if that's something you need to do. And as you scroll down the various rules, you'll see which ones can be grouped together into more global rules that are going to provide you with the same output, I guess, from a security perspective, but less processing intensive. All right, finally, the next thing that you would do here to clean up your stuff, just a second, I logged myself out accidentally. Let's come back in. All right, the final step of cleaning up the rules here would be to, pardon me, we want to run the highly used rules low in the rule-based report. So what that's going to tell us is rules that are sitting lower down in our firewall policy that are getting a lot of hits, basically, which is obviously going to cause a lot of unnecessary thrashing of your CPU and RAM resources. If you have rules that have a ton of hits that are low down in the policy, it'll have to step through every rule above it. As you know, firewall rules will be sequentially checked until a rule is hit that matches the packet that's being inspected, and then that packet will be processed. So it has to step through 20 rules, several million times before it hits the rule that's going to allow it to pass. Obviously, that's going to put a lot of strain on the resources of your firewalls and cause you to have to upgrade stuff faster than normally. So this report is going to allow you to find those rules that are meeting that criteria. I happen to know that there are none of those on that Palo Alto, so I'm going to pick on a Cisco firewall here just to show you what that looks like. So if I look down here, and I'll choose that Cisco device, and I'll back up perhaps to maybe 180 days to get some good data on how long this has been going on. And I want to see the object details and group members. And again, I can go ahead and run that report and show you that there will be, oh, I didn't go back far enough apparently. There we go. So if you look at this Cisco ASA and you go back far enough to understand all of the hit counts, you can see here that you have rule number 7 sitting on this Cisco with a hit count of over 7 million. And you can see that obviously if you move that up to rule number 1, that would be 7 million times that rules 1 through 6 don't have to get hit, which obviously will save your Cisco firewall an awful lot of resource utilization. So that's probably what you would want to move up the policy to extend the life of this device. All right, now moving on to the rule cleanup themselves. Security Manager can help you identify a lot of inefficiencies directly in the GUI. So if we take a look at the policy overview dashboard, you can see where some of that's going to live. And I need to log back in, excuse me. So we're actually at this stage. So here in the KPIs up at the top, we have some of the percentage of unused rules for the past 90 days, which in this case is a large percentage of the rules in the training lab here. The widget also tells you how many rules make up that percentage. And of course, if you wanted to go ahead and click that, you could just do that and go and take a look at the rules themselves to understand what it is you can clean up here. And you can also see in these widgets here that you're going to be shown the rules that have been identified for cleanup and improvement, which is essentially the ones that are going to be redundant, shadowed, unused for the last 90 days, or even expired rules as well. And some that are going to be tagged as in need of improvement, which are rules that are going to be in disabled status or aren't logging or have no comments in the field, and so on down the line to help you keep those rules nice and clean. If I actually go to that cleanup needed tag here, you can see that you will get a list of those, and you will see what they are here, going down the right there. You can also do this from the security rules tab if you wanted to do it via report or set that up as a scheduled report. That it's going to tell you what rules haven't been used over the past X months or days. You could do that by setting up a filter here. And you would set up a filter by choosing a properties filter if you wanted to do this way, and then you could select what properties of those rules it is you want to find out. For example, if I only want to see unused rules, or if I want to see unused, shadowed, and redundant rules, I could set up this filter, go ahead, click apply, and if I wanted to get this on a regular basis, I could save this filter as something, and then create one of those scheduled reports, schedule it to send it to myself however often I like, and then every month or week or however often I want to take a look at this, I'll be sent a report showing me what rules haven't been used over the last time period, what rules might be shadowed or unused. allowing me to stay on top of all of that security infrastructure and keep them nice and clean. You can also set up a rule usage from the reports library as well, which will give you similar information to the dashboard. There's a couple of different ways you can get at it, but again, once you have a rule usage report, you could set this up as one of those scheduled reports to tell you, what rules haven't been used for X period of time. For example, if I was the owner of some sort of PCI infrastructure, I have to make sure I review my rules every 6 months, and I have to be able to prove that. So I would want to set up reports here for all my PCI devices that run at least every 6 months and tell me, well, these rules haven't been used in the past 6 months, and then I'd have to go in there, document them, where I could use those documentation fields to demonstrate that I've done that particular review, and then be able to show all that lovely report and documentation fields to the auditor to show them that we're on top of our rules, every 6 months. All right, in the last phase of reducing the complexity lifecycle, we're going to use what's called the TFA, or Traffic Flow Analysis tool, to help us pare down those overly permissive rules that we might have implemented for whatever reason in our infrastructure. The ones, those any except rules that you get forced into putting in there. So the TFA, or Traffic Flow Analysis, is going to let us view detailed data on the broad rules that might exist in our firewall policy. Security Manager is going to show us the hit counts on all of the objects in those rules, or it might be any objects in those rules, or perhaps large objects like large networks like 10.0.0.0. And then it's going to identify the standard sources, destinations, and services of the rule. With the TFA, you'll be able to view the flows that are actually being generated by that rule, allowing you to understand the associated traffic that it is passing. So armed with that information from your traffic flow analysis, you could reduce or even eliminate the use of those any objects, or split those large or overly complex rules into smaller ones, making it easier to maintain your security status and improving your performance as well. So a few notes here on traffic flow analysis. In order for them to work, the logging has to be enabled on the devices that you want to do the traffic flow analysis on, and its configuration has to have been normalized by FireMon at least once. Also, because there's a large amount of data involved, traffic flow analysis are not collected by default. You have to specifically enable it for the rules on which you want the detailed traffic flow data. Minor detail here, traffic flow data is not going to be retroactive. What that means is you will only see flows being allowed by a particular rule once you start to turn on that analysis and create a traffic flow profile to do so. The traffic flow analysis collects an awful lot of data. If they were turned on by default on one of your devices, you would start eating up this space an awful lot. So you turn these on as you need them, and then you will be able to actually see the data that's going through some of those rules and allow you to identify what's actually going on. So let me show you that, how you'd actually set it up and do it. All right, you're actually going to come in here and take a look at the traffic flow. Generally, you would start off in the security rules dashboard here and pick a rule that doesn't look good to you. For example, you might filter something on accept and decide that you want to have any in the source and destination field as the filtering for what you want to do. Just to make it a little quicker, I'll show you one that's a good candidate here, perhaps. For example, here's an any service this and accept, probably not the best rule. If I wanted to create a traffic flow profile for that, I could just come over to the right side here on the 3-button menu and create a traffic flow profile, which will take me to this menu. And now I'm clear that I'm looking on this particular device. You might want to start off by collecting the traffic for only 1 day to see just how much traffic is flowing through it. And then if that works out fine and doesn't bother anything in your system, you can move up to 7 or even a full month worth of traffic at a time. You'll have to give a traffic flow a name and a description. And since you've already targeted the rule here, it's going to be listed here since you picked it out of the security manager. And I can create this new traffic flow profile, and you can see that the flow has been created, and there's my new flow. And I will now be, for the next 30 days, watching what traffic flows through this particular rule. So for the purposes of demonstrating how this works, there's obviously no data here if you look at the disk usage, because I just created this profile and there's nothing flowing through it currently, or I won't see anything for the next few days until it starts to flow traffic through it. So what you want to look for here is one that's got some utilization and to understand how this works. So if I go ahead and pick this traffic flow here that Gary created on the Palo Alto firewall, I can go ahead and run the report. And I will be shown the details of what it is I want to see. I want to see the flows, I want to see the sources, I want to see the destinations, services, and applications that are being used. I even want to see the object details because I'm detail oriented that way. And once I run the report, I will actually be shown what the rule is that Gary set up this report on. It's one of those ugly any except rules that nobody wants to have hanging around. And you can see here that this traffic has been collected over the 7-day period here. And if you look at what has been allowed to flow through this any rule, you can see that there have been a total of 25 flows accepted. There are 15 IPv4 sources, 38 v4 destinations, and 1 v6, as well as 13 different services and 11 different application names that have been allowed to flow through this broad rule. So what this is going to allow you to do, as you scroll down here, is actually look at the flows that were accepted, what the source was, what the destination was, which is Google DNS clearly, and there it is, it's UDP 53. So you can see that this is a DNS rule, allowing all of that DNS to flow out of my network to get those DNS, get my resolved packets so I can understand where the traffic is coming from and where it's going to. And if I were to take this information and create a rule above this any rule that's allowing this current traffic, I would specify a source of this, a destination of this, and a rule of this, and then or a service of this. And the next time I run this traffic flow analysis, presumably this flow will no longer be passing through this, and I can work my way down and create a specific rule above the any rule that's currently letting these things go through, that is more specific to the source, destination, and service. And eventually, over several iterations of this, I'll be able to work my way down to no more traffic passing through this any rule, and I will have specific rules generated for each of the pieces of traffic that I found that were actually getting through that any rule. And then I can safely, according to my policy or corporate policy, either disable and eventually delete those any rules and get rid of them, keep my policy nice and clean from a security perspective. So another nice little tip here, you can also use a traffic flow analysis and run it against the explicit drop rules or cleanup rules at the bottom of your firewall. That way you can see what might be hitting your firewalls but not being allowed by any of the rules that exist in it. You can imagine that might be a very useful tool to have when you have applications that don't work because you've been given an incorrect list of firewall permissions to enable a particular application. That was a pretty standard thing back in my firewall management days. Someone would say, I need the following ports from destination A to from source A to destination B. And then I would implement exactly what was requested. And then I'd get a phone call next day saying, nah, you did something wrong because my application doesn't work. If I were to set up a TFA against the drop rule on the bottom of the firewall that I just put his policy in, then I would see whatever is hitting that drop rule that he forgot to ask me for. And then I'd be able to go back to them and say, hey, you needed to open the following 2 ports above and beyond what you asked me for. I opened them up for you. Your application works now. And I can maintain my reputation as a genius that way. All right, that takes us to the end of the cleanup and complexity reduction part. A few important points that you want to recall for this. If logging is not turned on your firewall rules, obviously you cannot reap the benefits of any usage analysis of those rules. Firewall complexity is generally where you're going to start your cleanup process based on which devices have the highest complexity score, hence the most potential for cleanup. The removable rules report is going to show you what rules can be probably removed because they're shadowed or redundant. And finally, that traffic flow analysis can show you the specifics of what flows are actually being allowed to pass through the use of those any objects or large network objects like 10.0.0 that might exist in your firewall rules. All right, moving on to our next section, we're going to talk about how you go about auditing for compliance in the FireMon universe. So we're going to look at FireMon enables, how FireMon enables your compliance auditing. We'll talk about compliance assessments and controls and how they're going to be used to stay on top of your particular compliance requirements. Oh, excuse me, just a second. I'm going to send this call to voicemail, pardon me. All right, let's start off with a few definitions. There's some terms here in FireMon's compliance tools that we should probably define so you understand everything in the simplest possible way. A control is going to be a safeguard or countermeasure that's going to help you detect, avoid, or counteract your network device risks. Basically, you can think of a control as an audit check of a given security requirement against your devices. Each control is going to be assigned a severity level. And that severity level will represent a measure of its security concern. So the higher the severity level, the higher the risk of that control failing on a particular device. An assessment is going to be a grouping of those controls which you can assign to your device or device groups that will notify you when a change occurs in that device or device group configuration. So instead of running an audit ad hoc on each device or device group to constantly check for compliance, assessments allow you to actually proactively monitor those device trends in that compliance context. Once your assessment is assigned, Security Manager will monitor the status of assigned devices against that assessment and the controls contained within. So if a control is a security requirement, think of an assessment as an audit of one of your devices or device groups against one or more of those security requirements or controls. So the Security Control Concern Index, or SCI, again, is a metric that is going to track the ratio of failed control severity in your network. It is found, again, by comparing the number of past controls to the number of failed controls against the total control severity that exists in your network to derive a percentage of Security Concern Index for a particular device or rule, which you can then use to analyze whether you have a relatively high number of failed controls or a relatively low number of failed controls in your world. All right, out of the box, we have several assessments already configured. Some of the default assessments are locked down, therefore cannot be edited. However, you are able to create duplicates of those assessments, which you can then edit and modify to meet your desired requirements, with a notable exception of the PCI DSS assessment, which is copyrighted and therefore can't be duplicated. We have what's called our FireMon Best Practices Assessment. Is one of those pre-configured assessments that is included in Security Manager. It is the one that is going to create all of your dashboards and all of the metrics when you pull your devices in. As soon as you drag a device into your FireMon ecosystem, it will be assigned to the All Devices group, and that All Devices group is assigned the Best Practices Assessment by default. So that means when you install Security Manager, everything in the All Devices group, as in all the devices that you manage with Security Manager, are going to be audited against the controls that exist in the Best Practices Assessment as soon as you collect and normalize the configuration of those devices. All right, to make use of compliance tools, the first step is to create zones and service groups that will be used as the building blocks of your controls. Security Manager comes preloaded with a set of compliance zones as well as a set of services that exist by default when you buy your FireMon Security Manager. A zone is a collection of network segments, essentially, and it does not contain other zones. You can't put a network segment in two different compliance zones. Otherwise, it kind of invalidates any report you try to run for compliance. So basically, to define a zone is to add the IP addresses of interface or network segments that make up the boundaries of that particular compliance zone. A service group is going to be an object representing a group of services or ports that you are going to test between those zones to understand whether or not you meet that compliance requirement. So certain zones and service groups have to be configured in order to use allowed services and service risk analysis type controls. Those particular audit controls will be checking whether a service is allowed from one network zone to another, and they are used in all of those preloaded compliance assessment, including PCI, which tells you that the results of those preloaded assessments aren't going to be reliable until you've configured the related compliance zones and service groups to meet what you have in your network. So zones and service groups are going to be set up in the administration panel from the compliance zone page of your FireMon Objects tab. Let me show you where that lives. So here you are in your administration panel. in the FireMon objects tabs, and the first thing we're going to look at are compliance zones. So here you are, that you're going to be able to look at compliance zones that are already configured. Those are the locked down ones that are already set up that you cannot change. All is basically all the zones that you have configured within your network, which are going to be all of these. The any is a little bit different. It basically includes any external as well as your internal ones. If you want to create a new one, a new compliance zone, you can do so by clicking the create button, giving your compliance zone a name, and then assigning whichever network segments are going to be a part of it through the assignment tab here, allowing you to create a particular compliance zone. You can also import network segments or compliance zones through a spreadsheet here, and you can be given here, if you want to do that, you will actually have to populate this spreadsheet with the specific data here for the zones that you want to pull in through some sort of import if you have a whole lot of segments and stuff that you want to pull in. So the same goes for services and service groups. You can look at the existing services here that are already set up for you in your FireMon ecosystem when you buy it out of the box. And you can create groups of those services in order to create the various controls that you're going to test against to understand what traffic's allowed to flow between one zone to the other. So you could actually go ahead and create new service groups as well if you wanted to, just by clicking the create here, giving that service group a name, and then assigning the various services that you want to be part of that group that you want to test a bunch of devices against for compliance. All right, having set up our zones and service groups, the next thing we'd want to do is use those zones and service groups to create those controls or audit items or whatever you want to call them. There are a lot of types of controls. Each have their own properties and capabilities. Security Manager is going to come preloaded with a library of controls. You can create new ones as well, but before you do, it's generally going to be a good idea to look at the properties for that control type and check whether there's one that already exists before you go creating a new one. That way, if you find a control that's pretty close to what you want, you can duplicate it, modify its settings as opposed to starting from scratch and creating your own. So once again, if I go over to the compliance, now I can take a look here at the controls and show you what they look like. These ones with the lock symbol are the ones that are going to be included by default with your FireMon ecosystem. You can make any changes to them. If you look here, there is no edit button. However, if I wish to make use of this control here that checks whether source or destination is using that big 10.0.0, I could duplicate it. And then once I've duplicated that, you can see that I am now able to edit that control, or I could actually just show you here that over on the side, I am now able to edit that as opposed to the default one I was not able to edit. So by duplicating it, then I can edit the control and decide what it is I want to set up as far as that control goes. So I'm going to draw attention to this evaluation section here when you're creating a control. This is where you decide whether the control is triggered by its Boolean values of true or false. So this is something you need to pay attention to ensure that you use the correct setting to achieve the desired alerting when a control is tested against the conditions that you have specified. So for example, here, fail if the query returns results means if the query here comes back with a result, then this control will be considered to have failed. If it doesn't return a result, the control will be considered to have failed, and information only will pretty much ignore it and just show you information. If you were looking to set up these controls to use for some sort of inventory pull or something like that, that's how you would set that up. You can also select this field here, which send fail rules to Policy Optimizer. That's how you automatically enable your compliance people to come in here and take a look whenever a control has failed. So if this control fails, that would basically send an email to your compliance people that you've got set up in Policy Optimizer, which we'll be looking at tomorrow. and tell them that somebody has done something they weren't supposed to do, and they need to take a look at it and either approve it with some sort of exemption or tell them to take it out. All right, so now we have our controls, and we are going to use those controls, which are based on zones and services, in order to create assessments, which is going to allow us to basically monitor our devices against those compliance controls to make sure that nothing ever violates them, and we get an immediate alert whenever anybody does do something that we've said they can't do. So those assessments are going to be also showing up in preloaded ones, such as the FireMon best practices. There's some for NIST, DISA, HIPAA, PCI as well. But you can also create completely custom assessments to test, whatever compliance requirements you have to. Generally speaking, it's highly recommended that you create these assessments in sections. Think of them as categories for your controls, and these sections are also going to create the structure for any assessment reports that you run, with the top section here, for example, access control being at the top of the report, and you could, below that, you can see inbound, outbound, and insecure services, and that would basically format that report telling you which of your devices have violated any of these particular controls down the line. So if I go to the assessments page, I can show you where you would set that up here in your FireMon ecosystem in the lab. Again, the compliance, and now you go to the assessments page, and you can see some of these lockdown ones that already exist. Those are the ones that come out of the box. Best practices right here has 97 controls that are running in it. If I wanted to take a look at it, you can see again that it's locked down. I cannot edit it. However, if I do duplicate it, and you can see that I've now got a duplicate here called My Best Prac. And if I actually go in here, in the right here, you can now see that I can edit this assessment, and I can go in there and take a look at it and look at that assessment builder, which is going to show me all of these sections. And you can see that there are actually 97 controls that are here assigned for my inbound services. It's going to check things like DNS allowed from external to internal zones. You can see that it's going to check against go to my PC allowed from external coming into our network, all kinds of various things like that that are assigned to best practices assessments, which is what's going to be used to, by default, audit your devices against these best practices. These might not be relevant to you, so by doing that duplicate and edit, you can come in here and remove some of these controls if you don't really want them. You could just disable them, or you can flat out delete them if you prefer, and make this assessment, do exactly what it is you want, as opposed to being forced to use all 97 controls that we've deemed best practices by default. All right, so now we have assessments. Those assessments contain controls, which in turn are based on the zones and services that we've created. The next thing we need to do is tell those assessments which devices or device groups that we want to audit with them. And we do that by assigning devices or device groups to one or more of those assessments. And that's not very complicated. You simply just come into the assessment tab in your compliance tab once again, and you have your assessment here. You decide which assessment it is you want to actually assign to a device or a group of devices. Let's just say that I want my best prac here, and I've decided that I need to assign it to the following device groups, just my Cisco ones I want to test with this. And I want to remove the all devices because by default it's set up there, and I can just remove that and only run this against my Cisco devices if I decided to do that. I can also choose individual devices as opposed to a device group to run this particular assessment against. And once I save that, that assessment is now assigned to my Cisco devices. And whenever any one of those controls gets tripped, where's my best prac? Here it is. Whenever any one of those 97 controls gets tripped, I will see that in the results, and I'll show you that in a second. So now that we've done all the prep work in the administration panel to set and assign our compliance assessments, what we'd want to do is go over to the assessments and controls results page in Security Manager, and that's where we're going to be able to look at how the assessment is running and determine whether or not it has been violated by any particular group or device group. So I'll just switch over to Security Manager. We're still in the administration panel here. So if I switch over to the Security Manager application and go look under the compliance tab, here's the dashboard here that's going to be able to tell us the various compliance status of our dashboards at a top level. You'll see here that I have various widgets here, how many control failures are out there in my devices, what the control failures are. I can scroll down and look at them if I wish. What rules are failing controls. I can look at a full list of those as well to see what my compliance control status is for the compliance that I'm trying to monitor for. I can see how it affects my average security concern index, and I can see which devices by security concern index are the most worrisome in my environment. They're going to be ranked in descending order. I'll also see a widget here for failed rules by control tags, which type of control I'm running against them, as well as the most severe control list, top 10 list here, and failed rules by cumulative severity list to get a good overview of what compliance controls are tripping in my environment, in what devices, and what rules are doing it. So if we switch over to the assessments result page, we'll get a little more detail on what it is that we are seeing, how many devices are assigned to which assessment here, which devices they are. And again, you can get a list of them just by clicking it down here, how many controls exist in that particular assessment, what their status is, whether they're critical, high, medium, or low, or just informational, whether they pass or skip, whether there's an error, it'll show up here as well. You can also run the report from here. And if you switch down here to the control results, you can get a very granular level of which control is failing on which device. And if you have been granted some sort of exception to the control failing by your compliance team or whoever it is that grants you those types of exemptions, if you've set up controls and assessments to trigger your compliance whenever anyone is violating it, and you do catch one, but you do get an exemption. For example, sometimes that happens, right? You put in an any rule because there's a huge financial penalty for not meeting a project timeline. That any rule with an except would, generally speaking, violate most compliance auditing. It would trip a control. And if that was the case, and your security compliance team has granted you an exemption of 6 months to say, you know what, we're going to let it pass for the 6 months because this is a big customer and we'll allow it for now, but come back in 6 months and review it again, you should be able to get rid of it with that TFA, or perhaps we'll review this assessment in that time period. So this is where you would come in here and create a whitelist to ignore that control for that time period. You would probably reference whatever document it is that your compliance team has given you, or whoever it is that approved that, and then you would set the expiration date for whatever time they told you to set it to. For example, if I wanted to go 6 months down the road, I could say that after September 14th, 2022, that control will start triggering again and creating, if I have selected go ahead and send those to Policy Optimizer, it would send that notification to my compliance team after that 6 months expires saying, yep, that control just got tripped again. You need to reapprove that exemption, or somebody needs to delete that rule because it's not compliant with the policies you set up. All right, that covers our section on compliance configurations. A few important points you want to take away from this. Certain controls and assessments are going to require that you set up zones and services before they can be used. You can create instances of pretty much any control type that you wish. It's completely flexible and up to you how you want to set up all that compliance. Security Manager will come with preloaded assessments for things like PCI, NIST, HIPAA, and so on. Just remember that you need to go into your services and compliance zones and make sure that you have the correct network segments and services set up for those assessments to actually run against the relevant infrastructure that you have. You can assign devices or device groups to assessments if you wish to enable that automated auditing of those devices against your compliance controls. All right, we're coming up on 20 after 12, and we have covered today's material. Not sure if you guys can ask any questions in the chat. If you do have them, please go ahead and fire away the questions, and I'll see if I can answer them for you. If not, by all means, please send me an email with the questions you have. You can reach me at mark.rich@firemon.com, and if you fire me a question, I will find the answer for you and send it back. All right, folks, a pleasure, and I will see you same place, same time tomorrow, and we'll get into more of the administration side of how you actually go about managing your FireMon ecosystem, bringing devices in, and things like that, as well as cover the modules that we haven't yet looked at, which would be Policy Planner and Policy Optimizer for your network changes and policy compliance approvals. Have yourselves a great afternoon and a great day, and I will see you all tomorrow.